Welcome back, everybody. We got a brand new episode for you guys today.
We got Paul and Christoph here as usual for the Hall of Gains and Hypertrophy podcast. We have our videos on today, so we'll see if we can utilize that. We're all new to this, so we'll see if we can post it with a video as well. We might post it just to our YouTube, but we'll see what the services allow. Hopefully we can post it elsewhere as well.
Giving you guys all the kind of content you want, because I know how much you want to just stare into our eyes as we talk to you.
Oh, yeah, exactly. This is way more intimate, way more personal.
Yeah.
So
If you don't watch the video, you're not going to understand what just happened. But Paul
I just stared straight into the camera with my blue eyes and blonde hair. So today we were going to be. So this is what we're supposed to talk about. Last week we're going to talk about basically back movements and how to grow a bigger back, how to focus on different heads of the muscles within your back. But we ended up just kind of shooting the shit last week. So this week we're going to actually talk about it. We're going to kind of do this.
This week's clickbait is going to be how to build back boobs.
Yes. Yeah, you want to have a second set of boobs in the back.
Exactly.
You want a back big enough for that. So we're going to be talking about that. We're going to kind of go through a series of sessions over the coming weeks where each week is a different muscle group because our hypertrophy episode got received pretty well. So we figured that we could do an episode on each general muscle group. We might combine arms with delts or something like that, just because they're all kind of small muscle groups. So we might tackle the small muscle groups in one episode, and then do back, and then maybe like a ham day, or maybe like a glute day or quad day. We don't know yet. We'll figure it out. But back day alone is definitely a really good option for us here for this session, because you talk to most bodybuilders and a lot of them will agree that shows are won from the back. So I think it's a good topic to really understand, and good muscle group to really understand, especially mind muscle connection and understanding the biomechanics and everything, and anatomy and the physics behind it. Because with back, chest is the opposite of back. Literally, your chest is essentially kind of like your lats for the front. Except it's kind of in the opposite direction. So you're pushing with your chest, but you're pulling with your back. So a lot of people call your pecs the lats of your chest. Essentially, they're calling it the lats of the front, but your lats fight gravity. Essentially, you're pulling gravity away from the earth, where typically chest, you're pushing gravity towards it. You're doing push-ups, you're kind of pushing something along earth. You're pushing, like, let's say a car, for instance, like that's what your chest does essentially, right? But your back is going to be pulling stuff away from it. So you're going to be fighting gravity with all of these movements. So I think understanding physics and how it targets the different muscles in your back, especially biomechanically, is very important. Obviously, you don't want to have anything too complex. I've talked about Ben Yanes on here, the Instagram profile. Much respect to him, but a lot of his movements are just like so biomechanically focused. They're just overly complex. And it's like, yeah, hypothetically, this should hit the muscle perfectly. But at the same time, this doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be hitting it perfectly. This doesn't necessarily mean it works for everybody, right? So I think that understanding what these movements entail and how they're supposed to hit the back, and whether or not it works for you, are things that you need to understand going into your back day. So that's what we're going to be talking about here today.
And you said that chest, your pecs are just the lats of your back. That's why back is just the boobs of the front of the back.
Yeah, we'll flip it.
And I think another thing that is really kind of a good place to start too is how undervalued, I guess, back is for anyone outside of the bodybuilding world. Because if you stand and flex, what you can't see your back unless you have like a camera mirror set up where it's bouncing off and you can look at yourself. Other than that, you literally don't see your back. So it's one of the tougher ones to stay disciplined for, because unless you're taking progress pictures, you're not able to, like, in the moment see, like, for example, for biceps, you can do a bicep curl or like a flex in the mirror and you can see exactly how it looks. and that's not really the case without a camera or a phone for your back. So that's why I think it's one of the more difficult ones to stay disciplined for, again, outside of the bodybuilding world, because unless you need to utilize your back strength for, like, obviously people in, construction or, anything that requires you to be lifting a ton of weight from the ground, obviously you need a, you know very big back. But outside of that, it's very difficult to stay on top of it. And from the lifestyle fitness group of people, we just say keep pushing through it. it there are girls who love having a guy with a great back, and if you're trying to get girls, that's kind of a thing you need to have, that and legs. So
Yeah, it's a good point you make, actually, that you can't see your back. It's much like your glutes and your hams. You can kind of get an idea of what they look like, but you never really know what they're going to actually look like. It's even hard to like understand it if you take photos or videos, because that's not what if you're doing for the photo or video is not how you naturally look.
well,
So
I think it's even more different than glutes and hams, because glutes and hams you can at least feel like you could put your hands there and be like, all right, cool,
yeah, that's
I
true.
like that. But back, I mean, I can't reach the middle of my upper back.
Yeah, I can't reach a lot of my back either, so I completely understand that. But I think like really the only way for me to understand where my back is if someone like took a random photo of me or took a random video that I wasn't expecting. But also back is interesting too because I mean there's a lot of ways to hit back. There's so many different movements you could possibly do, and there's so many like, oh, this works, this doesn't work. There's so many different ideas these people have for how you should be hitting back. But when you're getting video of your back, at least when you're hitting it, what's cool about it is that um, you're most likely, even if you're in a machine or something like that, it's really, really good for videos. And I just mean that by like your back is very open to air and space for people to get videos. So for instance, a couple weeks ago, or last back day actually, I was hitting my I'm always for they're cable pullovers, single arm cable pullovers. There it is. And getting the video of it was very easy because my back was facing away from the cable machine into open space, and the way the movement was going, it's not like I'm getting the movement's getting close to the cameraman. Like he could stay just behind me and never worry about getting hit by the weight or anything like that. So I think that's cool about back, is that you don't have to worry about like where you are. As long as you're behind the person, you can get a good photo or video. But back is, like I said, also one in shows. I mean, every single male division really takes back into account. Men's physique, literally half of the judging is on your back. There's front pose and back pose. That's it. So back is very important. Traps included. Whether or not you count traps as back or shoulders is up to you. I think we'll cover traps on another episode. But for me, the way I consider traps is your middle traps are part of your back because they kind of sit between your scapula and then which is your shoulder blades. But then there's also the top of your traps, which kind of sits on your shoulders, essentially connects your lats and your delts to your neck. I consider that your shoulders. So I consider it two different body parts, essentially. So that's what men's physique judges a lot of. When you're doing the back pose, it's going to be your delts, your traps, and your back. And the way you're flexing it as well is going to play a huge role, because for me, I have a lot more thickness than I do width, which I need to work on. And I'm going to start going to a different gym to start working on more width, because the gym I go to now just doesn't have the best options for width, which we're going to be talking about what movements to build width, what movements to build thickness, because that's really what it comes down to is, you listen to any Arnold's back day talks or anything like that. He would talk about how there's thickness and there's width, and you got to have both. So, building that up, having both of those attributes is going to be imperative to winning shows. Obviously, you can have a really good front and like good back and win, as long as your front is absolutely fucking dialed to the fucking gills. You're lean as shit, and you also have a perfect front. Then you might get a chance of winning. But if you don't have a dialed in back, then you're going to have a much harder chance of winning. If you're going to be competing in men's physique, which I think, so a lot of our listeners, I believe, are on kind of the beginner intermediate side, which a lot of you most likely haven't competed yet if you plan on competing. So with that being said, Men's physique is most likely going to be your stepping stone to get started in bodybuilding. Not necessarily that's where you want to stay, but that's probably where you're going to start. Go ahead. You're
No,
laughing.
no, go right into men's open. Do not do not do anything else. Go right into the big division.
Yeah, skip right on through. Skip right on through and go straight to super heavyweight. Just go straight to 300 pounds. Just skip all the fat build and just build straight muscle only. That's the
compete
key to.
compete in men's open when you're still 160.
Yeah. So here's the thing with men's open. If you don't know, if you're kind of new to the gym or kind of new to bodybuilding, if you think so, when I start with my coach, this is something I want to mention because this is the more I'm in the gym and the more experience I get, the more I realize it's true. When I started, I wanted to be men's open super heavyweight. I want to be fucking massive. Like that was my goal. And I would still love to be massive, but knowing what I know now, genetically speaking, I am fucking not built for that shit. And if you're built for men's open, even like just like pro level, you're going to fucking put on muscle like crazy. You know, there's dudes that are like 19, 20 years old that are twice my size. And that's just because they're genetically built to put on muscle. You know, like Dorian Yates at fucking 18 or 19 years old was fucking massive. Like natural too, apparently. He said he was natural at 18, 19. He's very open about his steroid use, so I believe him when he says he was natural at that point, because why would he lie about being taking it at 18 but then not lie about anyways. I think that he was natural at 18, 19, like he said. And dude fucking looked insane. So genetically speaking, if you're going to be competing in men's open, you will know. You'll put on muscle like a motherfucker without even meaning to. So I think that's like the telltale sign. And I don't mean like, oh, like I'm responding pretty well, I'm putting on some muscle. Like you're in the gym 2-3 years and you're still fucking packing that shit on. And that's when you'll know. You know, you're getting enormous without even really trying. There's a dude at the gym right now. He's 22 years old. Dude's enormous. He's built for men's open, but he get fucking squashed in probably classic or men's physique because he doesn't have the structure for it. So everybody's got to work with their genetics. And when it comes to back, your back is going to respond in very, very different ways. You're going to watch, if you watch like lifestyle guys, the way they work back is entirely different from the way that bodybuilders work back. It's incredibly different. There's a lot of like sled pushing, a lot of kettlebell shit, stuff like that is what you're going to see for lifestyle, which will definitely get you lean and get you looking good. If you just want a beach body, you can absolutely do stuff like that. You know, resistance band shit, body weight stuff, kettlebells, all of that will get you to a place where you're going to have 6-pack abs. You're going to look pretty lean. You're going to have some muscle tone. You're going to have some, you know, muscle size even. A good example of that is Garrett from Siesta Key. What is his last name? Let me look up his last name. He's a really good example of Garrett Miller. So Garrett Miller is a good example of a lifestyle lifter in a sense. If you follow his content, he's kind of the reason I started in the gym in the first place, is because of that show, Siesta Key. But he's a good example of what you can achieve naturally lifestyle wise if you just focused on key movements, body weight movements, pushing sleds for legs, stuff like that. A lot of like you know, interval training. Interval training is huge for stuff like that. You can build a pretty good physique, but we're talking from the bodybuilding perspective, which, you know, there's so many facets to back. It's going to be a pretty in-depth conversation today, but I mean, I know I'm kind of rambling right now. I just wanted to set the stage and set the expectations for this episode. So that way, you know, what's going to be coming up.
Nice play on words. Set the stage. As we just finished a little bodybuilding talk.
Yeah, actually, that's a good pun. We're going to set the
Yeah.
stage for bodybuilding competition talk.
Get that spray tan on and get ready to listen.
Yeah. There's you talk to anybody who works at a hotel that's near a bodybuilding competition, they'll say that the worst conventions are bodybuilding conventions.
Yeah, because you got to wash the sheets like 3 times just to get the spray tan off.
I was surprised by that. I was reading or I was actually listening to a YouTube video of a guy reading out one of those like r/x ask or whatever Reddit posts. So it was like a question. It said, hotel workers, what's the worst convention near you? Like, what's the worst one that you guys encounter? And like the top like 3 answers were all bodybuilding. And I'm like, damn, I was expecting like Comic-Con or like anime stuff, like just because like they don't really, a lot of them don't really wear deodorant and shit like that. and it's like a problem. So I'm like, okay, maybe that, or like maybe like some like older people stuff, like if there's like a yarn or convention or some shit like that, or like Tupperware
You say
conventions.
yarn?
Yeah, there's conventions for everything. You name it,
There's
there's a
no
convention
way
for it.
there's a yarn convention.
100%. Google it. It's like Rule 33 or whatever it is. There's a convention for everything. Synthetic Yarn and Fiber Association Conference,
I hate this.
20th of April and 21st of April. That's in
I hate
Charlotte.
this. I hate this. You better
I
go to
told
that.
you. I told you. There's a convention for everything.
You better go to that.
It's called Fiberfest. There's one called Fiberfest, Carolina Fiberfest. I told you, it's knitting, crocheting, weaving, felting, all different kinds of like yarn stuff. So
And
like that's what I
speaking about
imagine.
and
Yeah,
speaking about fibers, the fibers in your back need to be worked
muscle fiber
consistently.
striations,
There's
alien
our
gains.
segue.
Yeah, so
Otherwise,
it was just
otherwise we'll
surprising to
talk
me.
about yarn for an hour.
Yeah, let's not get into that. But yeah, it was just surprising to me that. But it's also not surprising because spray tan is such a staple within bodybuilding, which is also interesting to me because it's like you're. It's a weird topic because we'll get into back in a second. I just want to mention this. So we're talking about bodybuilding, and it's like, okay, what's the ideal physique for men or women or whatever it is? What's the best we can get our bodies to, right? That's the idea behind bodybuilding is let me show you. I put in the effort with food training to get to this point. Let me show you what I'm offering. I think I have a better physique than the other people here. That's what bodybuilding is. And through my posing and through my stage presence and through what I've done in the past, the journey to get here, whether or not you took drugs or not, this is what I'm presenting as my physique. Then they're like, you know what? We're going to just douse everyone in fake spray tan. I'm just like, why not just present us the way we're supposed to be? Like,
So the one thing that I'll push back on that is that I know for a fact when I look at my quads, I know when I flex, I can see a little bit of definition, like in terms of like the teardrop and whatnot. But if that, well, the spray tan is just like overemphasizing your ridge lines. That's what it does. So it helps to provide extra definition on stage.
yeah, I
Because
mean, if it's done well,
my thighs are white as all hell, like they've never seen the sun. So that's
yeah,
why it's very difficult to see the lines of, like, obviously I'm myself and I overanalyze myself so I'm able to see them. But if
mhm.
other people want to see them, there has to be some kind of color to provide that little bit of definition.
Which, yeah, okay, I can understand that. But there's also times where the spray tan isn't very good, especially like regional shows. Like sometimes the spray tan is not the best; it's very orangey. But my other argument too is that if that's true, if like let's just say, every single person needs to be tan for the show, why not just get the tanning done on your own? Maybe that should be part of the process is coming in tan, but like a natural tan. Like I would go to like a tanning bed or something and like start getting tan within like 16 weeks or something. Go for like 4 months, get tan, use the sun or whatever. And that's part of the show is that like not it's judged, but your tan overall needs to look good, because
Well,
like there's been issues. Like I think who was it? It was Hunter Labrada had an issue where he was guest posing and they spray tanned him and he was bleeding the spray tan, which is like it was like his sweat was pulling it off him. So it didn't look good. And it's like, this is what I'm talking about. Like the spray tan can kind of sometimes ruin the look. Not that that's always the case, but I just think that it's just interesting aspect of bodybuilding is that spray tan is involved when spray tan isn't even like because like drugs aren't natural, but like spray tan isn't even like your actual skin color. Like you're fucking up your whole skin color and it's only temporary, you
well,
know?
the thing is with a real tan, it's literally like cooking a chicken skin. Like you are doing damage, excuse me, to your skin, whereas a
Mhm.
spray tan is essentially lathering yourself in like an oil and
Yeah.
it's intended to come off. So obviously, in the bodybuilding world, we're not exactly super focused on longevity. I mean, we
Yeah.
like there are ways to do it, but we're not that's not our primary focus. So I can understand why the mindset of not caring about longevity and just going for the real tan would be worth it. But I think that's one side of things that people are kind of drawing the line and saying, all right, no, we're gonna focus on just natural, and then we'll spray this on for 1-2 days, get it off, done.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't know. I think it's an interesting topic because there's good and bad to it. I just think if it's done well, it looks great. But there's just times where it's like if it's not done well, it's like why even bother? Like that Hunter Labrada situation. It's like it wasn't his fault that happened. So I didn't really, and he was guest posing anyways. It's not like for a show. So I was just like, it just sucks for him because it made him look bad, even though we all know he doesn't look bad. He was guest posing. Like he's clearly like a an expert in his craft, but it didn't look well. But it is what it is. It's just an interesting topic to talk about, and you'll hear different opinions on it. And anybody who's outside of bodybuilding will say that they don't like how bodybuilders get spray tans done. Like my wife is like, why do they look so orange? Because like they'll spray tan their whole body, but then like pretty much leave their face. And
So
I'm like,
that's the thing. Yeah,
yeah,
nothing's
and
worse than a pasty white dude who doesn't get
yeah,
anything done to his face, and
yeah.
it's just easy to see.
Right. And that's another thing to mention too is like I showed my wife, photos of bodybuilding, stuff like that. I'm like, this is what I want to look like, blah, blah, blah. This is C-bomb, he just won, whatever. And she like would point out the tan. She'd be like, why does his face look so white, but the rest of his body looks orange? I'm like, well, that's just a spray tan. That's just part of it. Like you have to get spray tan. Even if you have a very, very dark complexion, they still add a little bit of spray tan wherever they need it. But it ends up working in my favor and it's going to end up working in your favor because the spray tan also hide your tattoos a bit. Something to mention is tattoos in the past have been very frowned upon within bodybuilding. It's changed over the years. It's gotten much better over the years. But spray tans do hide your tattoos quite a bit. It's not as obvious. So for me having a sleeve, Stoff, you having your tattoo coming up soon, and that one on your forearm, it's not that it's not anymore that it hurts our physique, but it doesn't help. If you don't have tattoos, you can see more definition, which is just the reality. My right arm looks better than my left arm, but that's because of the tattoos, right? So the spray tan is going to help with hiding that. But I don't want to keep going on this topic. We keep going off on topics like we did last week, and that's why we didn't even talk about back at all. But yeah, so let's talk about back. Where did you want to start, Stoff? Any ideas where you wanted to start today? Anything in particular?
You want to be uber careful about your lower back. I think that's
Yes, that's
I
good.
think cover our safety bases. So
Uh-huh.
when especially when you're not hitting a back movement and you feel your lower back getting triggered, that's like the golden rule of the gym. Like if for some reason you're triggering your lower back on like a dumbbell curl, you're doing something wrong. So
Right.
in terms of a safety like perspective, whenever you're hitting some kind of back movement, even if you are targeting your lower back, which is there are plenty of movements that do that, you want to be very careful because that particular area is what connects your like if you think about your spine, it's what connects you to your lower half of your body, and quite literally one tap of a hammer on your lower spine will paralyze you from the waist down. So you want to be uber careful when it comes to doing any kind of movements and you feel your lower back being engaged, just because the risk factor is so high. So um an example that I like to think of is like when you do like rows and you angle yourself in the position, like essentially to hit your lower back on a row, you have to be on like an uber decline. I feel
Lower
like,
lat. Lower lat.
yeah,
We should clarify lower lat.
yeah, there you
Go
go.
ahead. Yep.
But when you're activating that and you feel it, I would focus like I would do max time under tension for that, not volume, just because you want to feel the muscle, get it going, but not overwork it. Because if you do like a volume set for your lower lats, it's you just increase your risk factor. And again, we prefaced earlier how in the bodybuilding world we're not always worried about longevity. This is
Hmm.
one of those areas there's no give for. Like you have to be very careful with that section. So I think just from everything, that's kind of where we need to start, because if people
Yeah.
go and do what we say for this episode and they engage their muscles and then they walk out not being able to stand up straight, I think that's a problem. So
Yeah.
you have to really think about what you're working and make sure you don't mess with your body too much.
Right. Your lower back. It's a good thing to preface everything by your lower back. If it's not a lower back movement specifically, should not be activating. Even on leg days, you're going to have that with leg days. Legs is also a move. So your lower back is a key component within your core. Everybody's going to argue what's in your core, what's not in your core. The reality is your entire body is part of your core. But really, the biggest components to your core, believe it or not, is going to be your legs, your hips, your lower back, and your abs. That's where a lot of your core comes from. It's the center of your gravity, center of your mass. That's going to be contributing to your core. So having a strong core, a lot of that is built from your legs, especially when you're standing. But when you're sitting, it's going to come from your lower back and from your abs. So to not target your lower back, when you're new to the gym, it's going to take some mind muscle connection. And I know that, there's Ben Yanes is one of these people who says mind muscle connection isn't everything. Mind muscle connection, in my opinion, is extremely important. You don't have to have mind muscle connection to work a muscle, but to target specific heads of muscles, to target the muscle a specific way, a good mind muscle connection is going to be very important. And not targeting the lower back will take time. When you're new to the gym, you're going to hit your lower back, and that's okay. But just make sure that you're not overloading your lower back, and you're not injuring yourself in that sense, because there's going to be days where, like when I started out, there was days where like the next day my lower back was so incredibly sore, because even though I was doing, X back movement, my lower back was still activating. Now I've been in the gym long enough to where I can target specific muscles in my back, which is a really cool feeling when you build that mind muscle connection. Because I've told everybody before, it's a click. It clicks in your mind. Everything just works. All of a sudden, you're just like, wow, I can really feel it there now. So when you get to that point, it's really, really cool feeling. It's really fun to start to experiment with different movements at that point. But until then, your lower back is going to activate a little bit. It's just something that your body is used to using. You're hunched over like I am right now. I'm hunched over my seat. Your lower back is activated in that sense. You're driving. A lot of people activate their lower backs when they're driving. It's just a muscle that we end up, activating a lot. So not targeting it is very hard. And it's okay if you hit it a little bit. It's okay if you don't mean to hit it and you just feel it activate. But part of lifting is a skill. Lifting is a skill that's going to take some time to learn. And one of those things is not activating the lower back when you don't plan on activating it. So, there's going to be lower back movements that will help with building it when you get to the point where you don't target it at all, on like you're targeting it, not hitting it when you're not targeting it. So, whether that's lower back raises on, some sort of, I forget what they're called. The little
Yeah, they got the pads and you just go down.
yeah, yeah. I always forget. I want to call them Roman chairs, but they're not Roman chairs.
No, they're not.
Wait,
Yeah.
are they? Wait, no.
No,
Are they Roman chairs?
Roman chair is what you're doing
No, they're
for
Roman chairs. Captain's chairs is what I'm thinking of. So it's a Roman chair. A captain chair is for your lower abs,
yeah.
or leg raises, stuff like that. Yeah, so that's a captain's chair. So Roman chair is what I'm thinking of. Yeah, so if you're doing back raises in a Roman chair, or you're doing lower back like extensions with the machine, the how did I get to romantic gym? I meant Roman chair.
Ooh. Ooh.
Romantic gym just looks like a dude just doing push-ups with his girl on his back.
Oh, it's
So
not Valentine's Day yet. God.
whoa, too early for that. So there's also the machine, the gym I'll be going to for back soon will have that machine where it's a pad that kind of connects to your middle back and you kind of push it backwards. It's essentially the same thing. Your lower back essentially just helps your glutes and your hams raising your upper torso up. It arches your back. It helps with keeping your back straight. So that's all the movement's really going to be doing, is just hinging at your hips essentially. So like I said, it's going to be okay if you target it a little bit, you feel a little bit, it's okay. Just be careful not to overload it, because then that's when you hurt yourself, and that's when you start damaging your spine. And that sounds kind of ridiculous because you're hitting a muscle, but you can actually genuinely injure your spine. And back is a lot of the movements are very, very hard to learn. Deadlifts is one of the hardest movements to learn effectively. So if you're not learning it effectively, or you're doing too much weight, you're going to feel it. And back is definitely a muscle group, you need to start out light. You need to leave your ego at the door, and just really focus on squeezing whatever muscle you're working on, whether that's your teres major minor, your rhomboids, your lats, your lower back, your traps, whatever it is. You need to be focused on targeting that. So one thing I did want to add from what I said earlier is that I consider rhomboids, which is your lower traps. A lot of people call it your lower traps, your middle traps, part of your back. Where your traps, your upper traps that connect your shoulders and your delts and all of that to your lats and your back, your neck, that's your traps. So, well, I'll focus when I put this episode up on the blog. I will put a good diagram of the muscles in your back. So your rhomboids are going to be like kind of your lower lats. There's going to be rhomboid major, minor, and then there's going to be your traps. Your traps connect directly to your neck and to your head. So I do want to correct myself there. I also really, really fast, and we'll get back to back. I do want to correct myself. Carterin is not technically a SARM. Let me look it up exactly what it is. I forget the term for it. It's a PPAR delta receptor agonist. So what that stands for, where is it? Why can't I find it? So SARM, okay, so it's a peroxisome proliferator activated receptor. So it targets differently than an androgen receptor modulator does. So a SARM activates androgens specifically, where PPAR agonists target a completely different thing. It's going to help with reducing triglyceride levels, causes more insulin sensitivity, enhances glucose metabolism, and enhances fatty acid metabolism. So overall, you're going to get more metabolism out of your system, and it's also going to help with the cholesterol. So that's why I feel I have better energy on Carterin, and that's why it helps with cholesterol and overall losing weight, because it targets all of those different fatty acids and everything for energy usage. I want to correct myself there. So getting back to back, we'll go into the different muscle movements and different muscles and how to target them, but your lower back is going to activate, and it's okay. And that's part of what a lifting belt is for. It's going to be kind of keeping your core tight, keeping your lower back from activating. Do not, I will die on this hill to the day that I die, or fight on this hill to the day that I die, is do not use your belt your entire fucking workout.
For every muscle group.
Like, I hate that shit. And like, I can understand if you're trying to bring in your waist or whatever, but it's like, dude, that's not how you do it. You do vacuums, you do ab movements, like you lose weight. Do not wear your weight belt your entire, like that's like wearing your lifting belt for all of your workouts is like wearing your knee sleeves for all of your workouts. It doesn't fucking do anything. Like, you're just making your core weaker.
Be a man and just wear a corset.
Yeah, just wear a corset. There's, believe it or not, there's so many men's physique competitors that wear fucking corsets when they lift.
I believe it. Stupid. I believe it.
So there's I used to have one. There is this kind of like wrap thing. I lost it. I don't know where it is. It's like $70 or something, and it goes around your waist, like your torso, and it's not really a lifting belt. It just kind of, you pull it in and you Velcro it across, and it keeps your core tight. And the point is that when you're doing movements and you're expelling, like you're not expelling, like when you're using muscles within that group, it keeps it tight. So that way you're building the muscles within there, but you're keeping them tight. It keeps it all together. So that way your waist looks visually smaller when you wear it consistently at the gym. So I can kind of understand that. It does kind of like stop your breathing a little bit, like because it pulls in your belly, it's harder to breathe while wearing it. But there's dudes who wear legit fucking corsets. And I'm like, dude, you look like you have tits right now because your corset is pulling your fucking boobs, your pecs right over them. Like, you look legit like you have tits. Corsets are just not something that should be ever used in bodybuilding. It's so unnatural to wear a corset, and it alters your organs, it alters your bone structure. It is not good for you. So do not ever wear a corset if you're a bodybuilder, or just in general.
And,
I think in general.
What Paul was saying too about wearing a belt to obviously not in every workout. Excuse me, not in every workout, but an example of when you're not necessarily supposed to be engaging your back and you're just wearing the belt to provide extra support would be squatting, because squatting, you want to make sure to keep a very, fixated position with your back, where so that way you're getting just full activation from your quads and your hamstrings as you do that particular movement. So that's why you'll see people in heavy sets using a belt for squats, because that's exactly what they're doing. They're just supporting their lower back and making sure that when they put all that weight on themselves, they're not actually, crunching their back or anything. It's just going all
Mhm.
with their legs. So that's just one example of when someone would wear a belt on a non-back day.
Yeah. I think that the only time you should really be wearing a belt is if you are going to be putting a lot of strain on your core and you don't want to be putting that strain on your core. So like squats is a good example of that. Any sort of variation of deadlifts. Um, we're also talking like not even every set of that, just do the heavier sets, the sets where like you can feel your core starting to get tired. Like when I'm doing squats, I'll do like a plate and then I'll do 2 plates, maybe even 2 plates and a quarter without using a belt. I'll throw on my knee sleeves probably second, with the 2 plates just because I would rather prolong my knees than anything. But like your belt should only really be taken into account or be used when you know you're going to be going extremely heavy on whatever you're using. I was doing walking lunges. So my entire leg day on Thursday, I didn't use my belt at all. I did hack squat, linear hack squat, which is very interesting. I'm not sure if I'm the biggest fan of linear hack squat machines. My first time really using it. Then he used a dual leg press machine. Didn't use it then. I also did it with walking lunges. Oh no, I did use my belt actually that day. So walking lunges, I got to, as far as good sets, I did a plate on each side, so 135 for 10 for each leg. And then I did straight leg deadlifts for hams, and that's when I used my belt, was when I got up to 2 plates. And I only used my belt for that top set for 2 plates on each side, so 225. I think I got like 8 or something out of it. I think I put another 10 on each side, but only got like 4. I forget what it was exactly. I have to take a look, but that's the only time I use my belt. So like you should really, even though the movement might target your core a bit more, only really use it when you need it. It's an accessory. It's something that's supposed to help with your lift. You don't want it to hinder anything. If you're wearing it all the time, you're going to weaken your core. You're going to weaken your back. You're going to weaken your joints that rely on your core. Much like knee sleeves, you should only be using knee sleeves or knee wraps when you absolutely need them. You should not be wearing them when you don't need them, because then you're just going to weaken your knee joints because you're going to start relying on those knee sleeves. So I think that something that I've always believed in is that you should only use these accessories when you absolutely need them. The more you use them, the more you're going to need them. I know plenty of guys who wear like they do like a warm up on chest, and then all of a sudden they're wearing elbow sleeves the rest of the workout, and they have to start doing that and keep doing that because their elbows are so bad now. Their elbows rely so heavily on it that their tendons are weak, their joints are weak. They have to keep using it. So the less you use accessories, the better. Like you're saying, Stoff, it's going to help with your lower back not activating. Another option for your belt is going to be your deadlifts. If you're doing heavy deadlifts or rack pulls, something like that, you want to focus on your lats. Do it on the heavier sets.
I
Your
was going to
rows
say,
as well.
those are the only two movements that I ever actually use my belt for: squats and
Yeah,
deadlifts. And
that's fair.
my coach doesn't even have me deadlifting right now, so I'm literally just using it for squats.
Yeah, I mean deadlifts have their place. I think that hypertrophy wise, there's going to be better options than straight deadlifts or back. Sometimes I'll throw deadlifts in there for an overall insane compound movement. It's going to target a little bit of everything. But I try to target my lats as best I can. But rack pulls, like which is part of your plan now, rack pulls is designed to just be the part of the deadlift that your lats do, that your lats are targeting or targeted. So up until with the bar being just below your knees, anything past that or up higher than that is going to be your lats. Anything lower than that is all your legs. So that's why they call deadlifts are the entire behind or back of your body. Not that it's just your back, but it's also your hams, your glutes, your calves, your lower back, your traps. That's what deadlifts target. It's your entire back of your body. The front of your body isn't doing anything really. So when you're doing rack pulls, that's the lats. When you're doing anything up until your knees, that's all legs. So I think a belt for heavy rack pulls could help. Also, a belt for heavy rows can help too. When you're starting out with rows, you want to go really, really light. You want to make sure you're really squeezing your lats. You're really contracting really well, stretching them all the way out. You don't want to round out your back. We'll get into more of the actual form of different movements, but when you're targeting when you're doing rows and you're getting really really heavy, like past a plate is pretty heavy for a row. If you're rowing past a plate, you're relatively strong. At the very least, you're pretty strong. You're definitely stronger than most people that don't go to the gym. You should be using a plate at that, or a belt at that point, because you're going to be putting a lot of strain on your lower back to stay hinged at the degree that you're staying hinged at, whether it's 45 degrees or higher or something like that. So that's I think an important time to use the belt is when you're doing heavier rows. Obviously, you don't want to use them all the time. You want to keep your core strong, so don't use your belt for every single set, like I said. But for the heavier sets where you really want to just target your lats and really go as hard as you can without injuring yourself or really targeting your lower back, then that's when you use a belt.
Yeah, and it's just really important, like Paul said, not to use it for every time because part of what we're doing when we hit back is, working on a muscle that might not be one that you're really disciplined on yet. So in order to you have to force yourself to not use it because it feels good to have a belt on and lift a ton of weight, but at the same time, it would be way more redeeming to be able to move that weight without the belt. And
Mhm.
so in order to get yourself to that point, you have to build up to it. So using the belt less and less is kind of where we should be focusing on with when you're thinking about basically if you have to think about using the belt, you shouldn't use it unless you feel like you're doing your max set or something like that. You really shouldn't use it outside of that. The people that wear it around all the time, they're the just the noobs of the gym.
Yeah, it is. It's very like goblin-y to kind of do that. Like
Hmm.
there's like I used to go to Van Arky in Gardner, Massachusetts, and there's a lot of newbies there because it's kind of like underground, kind of bodybuilding focused. There's a lot of newbies who will wear a belt the entire time, even doing like chest, and it's just insane to me that like that's even part of your like thought process is, you know what, I'm going to target my pecs. Let me put on something that doesn't allow me to target my lower back. It's like, what? You don't need
Hmm.
that shit. What are you doing? Um, Another thing to add too is there's different kinds of belts. If you're going to be going for bodybuilding for aesthetics, you're going to get essentially the belt that's thickest at your lower back and then thin in the front. Essentially, what that's going to do is going to help with the front of your body bending more. You're going to be activating your abs a bit more, and it's going to be keeping your lower back stiff. You're going to see a lot of not bodybuilders, a lot of power lifters, a lot of Olympic lifters using the latch belts, which they have their use, but not in bodybuilding. The latch belts or belts that are symmetrical all the way around are going to just make it more difficult for your body to bend, for your body to move. That's why they're good for deadlifts or sumo deadlifts, especially. But they're not really good for anything else. You don't want to be using them in my opinion, you don't want to be using belts like that for squats because you're not allowing your upper body to bend or move at all with the weight. Uh, Bench is another thing. That's a whole other topic as far as powerlifting goes. I don't know why anybody would ever use a belt for benching. I've seen people do it. I don't know why, but there are different kinds of belts, and I just always recommend, the typical belt that's thick in the back, thinner in the front. That's also double latched for the buckle itself. It's going to keep from ripping because if you have one latch, it's going to rip the holes much easier because you are going to be putting a lot of weight on the belt. So it's going to be ripping it a lot easier when you are putting the weight on the belt. Because when you're breathing, you're going to be stretching it out. You're going to be putting, your abs are going to be flexing and all of that. So something to keep in mind is just the longevity of the belt. And then also where you get the belt is going to play a role too, because the stitching can come loose. The colors can start to fade away. The leather can start to peel. Um, so I think that, where you get a belt, how much you spend on it is going to directly reflect on how long that belt lasts, just like any other accessory, lifting straps, sleeves, any sort of sleeve, any sort of clothing, everything's going to, whatever you pay for, especially when it comes to gym accessories, you're going to get typically you get your money's worth. Uh, I mean, we're talking, when I mention money's worth for knee sleeves, for instance, a lot of them are kind of the same thing, which is kind of what I was directing you towards, Christoph. But if you really want to go to like next level sleeves, you're going to have to spend double the money. And it's like, do I get a really good knee sleeve for $60 or do I get like next level amazing knee sleeve for like over $100. And it's like for bodybuilding, it's really not needed to spend so much money on thick SBD knee sleeves. But when you're getting a belt, something I did, I got a belt for my birthday one year. It took 4 months for them to make it, and it was custom made. It was stitched in Garni with my last name. So I still use that thing. I've been using it for about 2 years, or for over, was it? No, for about a year and a half now, and that thing is still going strong as hell, and still looks great. There's really no fading, no bleeding, like nothing like that. I mean, it looks used, but that's about it. And I really recommend to anybody, if you have the money, go to Iron Attitude belts. It's Cardillo, but way cheaper. Cardillo is very overrated in my opinion, but Iron Attitude belts all day long. I will preach them all day long. They're great. They have all different kinds of materials. They have like snake skin belts and crocodile belts and custom belts and all of that. So I recommend that for everybody who wants to. If you have the money to spend on a belt, get it from Iron Attitude. That's my opinion.
And focusing back in on back
Yeah.
for our lower lats, just a couple exercises that I think are at least my personal favorites. It might not be what I'm doing right now, just because I don't get to pick my what I do in a workout anymore. But what a couple of my favorites for hitting, like really activating that lower lat area. The number one that I would always do is wide grip lat pull downs, because as you make yourself, this is where we talk about, width and essentially girth. But when you have your arms out that wide and you pull them down, even if you do that just now without any kind of weight or anything, you can feel that the muscle that is being really contracted is down in the lower part of your back. And so to be doing that for progressively overloading that weight as well, not just going, you never want to do, lightweight and never pushing yourself to failure. Just with lower back, when we say failure for lower back, it might not be as intense as a different muscle group, just because, again, the high risk of injury. So
Mhm.
still progressively overloading and adding more and more weight, and dropping your reps to make sure you can do that, is really important. And personally, that wide grip lat pull down was, God, I keep burping. Wide grip lat pull down is a personal favorite of mine. Again, I don't get to do it anymore because I don't pick my workout plan anymore. The closest I get to it now is, it's a different movement. The I do chest supported rows, and if you drive your dumbbell to your hip instead of pulling up near your shoulders, or upper section, upper torso section, I should say. So if you're driving those dumbbells to your hip, that'll activate your lower lat area as well. So that is also an alternative. So when you're doing dumbbell rows, driving that dumbbell to your hip area instead of higher up in your frame, that will hit your lower lat and kind of give you a little bit more opportunity to build that muscle group. But especially from a posing perspective, lower lats are tough to fucking control. I know, Paul, you and I talk about it every time I send you my pictures. I
Yeah.
somehow have a little bit of control over mine, but that is just an incredibly difficult area to really flex and consistently control. So you just have to really trust the process and keep your discipline and keep working at it in order
Yeah.
to get to that point.
Yeah. Lower lats is a very interesting movement to hit because um, the way, so like what you were explaining, the wide grip pull downs, mind muscle connection plays a huge role into the way that you hit movements. And for me, I'm very different with that. Wide grip pull downs, I focus more, like obviously you're going to feel it in your lats, but I also allow my teres major and minor to activate. So your teres major and minor, when you're looking at a back, someone's back, let's say you're looking at like someone doing a lat spread, that ball kind of between their traps or lats and their delts is going to be your teres major and minor. Um, it looks kind of like your delt extended down your back a little bit. That's a very, very important muscle to hit, in my opinion. I think that's going to make your back look much, much better. Even looking at like Arnold's back, when he's flexing, it's there's the ball near his delt. Like his right delt, it's going to be bottom left of his delt is where that ball is. That's going to be your teres major and minor connecting right there. So that's something that I let lat pull downs kind of activate a bit. Something to keep in mind with lat pull downs is the way you hit them too. Because I see a lot of guys, this is something that you probably have done before. Not you necessarily, Christoph, I'm just mean like whoever's listening. When people do lat pull downs, a lot of times they'll pull it down, and as they're pulling down, they lean further back. And then when they let it back up, they go closer to the cable machine and more straighten out their back, straight up and down. You don't want to do that. What you're going to want to do is you want to get directly underneath the weight. When you're doing cable pull downs, let's say, for instance, you want to set up the leg resistance things, the pads directly above your quads, so that way you're squeezing your legs right into it. So it keeps you nice and steady. You want to go directly underneath the weight, which usually means like your abs should be touching the pads just about. You want to arc your back backwards and then pull down and not move. That's going to be targeting your lats perfectly. Another thing
I
to
can
keep. What's that?
just to interrupt real quick. I can
Yeah.
tell you why the two reasons why people do that lean method. One, the ego is not left at the door, and you can move a
Yeah.
lot more weight that way. But also the video of Arnold back in the 70s. I
Mhm.
couldn't tell you what the video was for, but everyone misperceives that video as thinking that's what they need to do because on his
Yes.
rows, on his pull downs, on his T-bar rows, he's like wildly moving around. And
Yes.
everybody misperceives that as I need to do that every day to look like Arnold when you don't realize that that was probably for him like some kind of a burnout set or something where he's putting every last bit that he has into it, or he's on like hour 4 or 5 because he's one of those people who would do 4 or 5 hour long workout sessions. So people don't understand that it's being done for a reason separate than what they think they should be doing.
Yeah. So to add to that, actually, that's a really good thing you bring up because that is where it originated from, essentially, for a lot of guys. What Arnold is doing in his pull downs and his rows is amazing. And I do it in my rows a lot, not all the time, but what he's doing is he's stretching out his back as much as possible. And then so like for his rows, right? The reason anybody leans forward in their rows is because of Arnold, essentially. So what he was doing in
Mm-hmm.
his close grip rows, he'd lean forward to stretch out his back entirely, then come back, he'd squeeze his back, and then do the row. So not at any point from the stretching and leaning back is he doing the row. He's just holding the weight, essentially. So he's just stretching his back out. That's all he's doing. And then when he comes back upright and then does the row, that's when he's actually doing the row. His lat pull downs are the same thing. He'll stretch out his back entirely, and then he'll get back into the position of the movement and lat pull down. Stretch out, lat pull down. So you can absolutely do that if you do it properly. But the problem a lot of people is that they swing the weight thinking that's what he's doing, when really that's not what he's doing. He's controlling the weight in the entire way. They also thought back then that they didn't really know what time under tension was. So a lot of their movements were very fast. There was very fast. It was like lifting as many times as they possibly can in that set, right? So that was the idea: was stretching it out, using the entire muscle and doing it as many times as possible. That's why he's doing it so fast. But he wasn't swinging the weight at any point. So these guys in the gym, they're using a lot of momentum when they're leaning back to start pulling the weight, and then as they pull back from leaning back, they pull down with their arms, and you're not really activating the way you should be. I mean, for me, my calisthenic strength is not very good, but some of the dudes with the biggest backs, all they do for anything like lat pull downs is just simply wide grip pull ups. That's it.
Yep.
Like they have some of the craziest lats, and because they're just targeting it properly, they're not stretching it. They're not. I mean, they're stretching it, but they're not using momentum. They're not cheating the rep in any sort of way. I mean, my coach recently, I sent him my back day weights every single day. I sent him my weights that I lifted. Monday of last week, I sent him my back day, and he said, I want you to start throwing in pull-ups with your back day. He said, just do as many as you can for 3 sets. And he said, I want to see that progressively get higher each back day. It's going to be a key movement to building your back bigger. Because my problem isn't necessarily the thickness, it's the width, like I was mentioning. And doing wide grip lat pull-ups, like I can barely even do a few because they're so fucking hard. So for me, cables end up working better. But I mean, I'm doing like 140 to 160 of solid 8 to 10 reps maybe for my top set, and that's it. But I see dudes like just in the gyms doing 200 for like 8, and I'm like, dude, you're swinging the weight. Like you're not activating the way you should be. something else to take into account is your shoulder joints as well. With lat pull downs, where your elbows are pointing is also going to target completely differently, or it's going to help with the rep overall. So when you're doing lat pull downs, wide grip or neutral grip doesn't matter. The way your elbows are pointing is going to target a little bit differently. If you're going to have them pointing in more inward, you're going to target more of your rhomboids, higher lats, and maybe even a little bit of teres major minor. Wider grip, you're going to be targeting more of your lower lats, a little bit of your rhomboids maybe, and that's about it. As long as you're not specifically targeting anything else like I am. The way your elbows are going to be gripped, or your way your elbows are going to be coming down for the lat pull downs with a wide grip, you want to keep your elbows almost parallel, completely outright when you're doing it. But then for me, when I do lat pull downs, I do a lot more neutral grip, which is going to be more inward a little bit. Your hand's going to be your palm's going to be facing each other. Then that's when you're going to want to pull in your elbows a little bit more. And then you also, another thing to take into account too, to really maximize the rep, you don't want to be stretching your elbows all the way out either. If you're going to be stretching out your elbows, you're going to start activating your biceps without meaning to bend your elbows. So keep your elbows bent, keep them locked, and go until the point your back is fully stretched out. You're going to feel it. You'll know when your back is stretched out, and then that's when you start your rep again. So a couple things to take into account for lat pull downs, because that is a lot of people's core movements or main movements, especially for warm-ups and starting it, which I think is your starting rep, right? Isn't that your starting movement? Reverse grip pull downs.
It's reverse grip. Yeah. So
Yeah.
because the reason for the reverse grip is because it's both a back and bi day. So you actually want to engage a little bit of your biceps on that particular movement.
Is that what he said?
No, but that's my understanding of it, because that's the only reason that I would do a reverse grip pull down.
So reverse grip pull down is
I understand that it also it continues to target your lats, but the reason why that is you would do that over a neutral grip or standard grip is that you have you're in a flex position for your biceps.
So here's my argument. Reverse grip pull downs, the way I would use it is almost like pullovers. So you have a pullover machine there at Empire, which I think you should be using. I don't know why it's not in your back day. I think personally, I would have done, if I was going to write your back day, I would have done it a little bit differently. I like the movements he has in there. I just think that you should use a little bit more back movement. And I think you should have a tricep and bicep day separate. But with that being said, the reverse grip pull downs, I would use them almost as like pullovers. So when you're pulling it down to your chin, you can absolutely not use your like you can use your biceps if you want to, but if you want to target your lats, which you should be doing here, you should not feel it in your biceps, in my opinion. You should be pulling from your elbows, pulling from your back, and just pulling it down like a pullover. So pullover pulls it over your head. Pull down, the way you sit, you can absolutely pull it to your back just like a pullover. And then that'll squeeze when you squeeze there. So thinking about it, it would be your rhomboids, your teres major minor, and a little bit of your middle lats. So this is going to help with growing your width a little bit. Is going to be your reverse grip pull downs. That's how I would use
pulling. He does have me pulling it to just below the chin, so not going all the way down into the rep.
Yeah, so it says 1.5 second hold just below your chin. So yeah, so holding it here, squeezing it, and then letting it go. Yeah, that's all back. Like even just doing it without any weight right now, if you're seeing the video, I'm doing it with no weight. Yeah, that's all back. And that's, for me, that's all teres major minor and outer lat right there. That's how it's targeted for me. And then when you're at the bottom and you're squeezing right here, you can absolutely squeeze your lower lats if you wanted to. That's what I'm doing right now. I can absolutely squeeze it right here, holding the weight, and then stretching it out. If you go nice and slow, focus on the negative and use your lat as resistance, yeah, you can build your width with that. So it's a good movement. There's a lot of that you can do with that. Chest supported rows, absolutely phenomenal. I love chest supported rows. T-bar rows, is he having you do barbell T-bar rows?
No, it's the plate loaded bar. No, plate loaded bar.
Yeah, okay, so it's a machine. So
no, it's literally just a bar fitted.
No, I know what you're talking about. It's still a machine. It's not free weight. Technically,
There's no machine aspect to it. It's a pivot in the ground that you put a bar into, and then you just load plates onto it.
Right. I'm just saying the difference. So it's when you're talking about the types of movements, there's free weight, cable, machine, essentially, for most movements. If it's a machine, if it doesn't involve cables and is not direct free weight, it's considered a machine. That's all I'm saying. Not that it's like pin loaded or really uses pivot like pulleys or anything like that. But because it's, you're kind of sitting in a contraption that's using a fulcrum, it's not free weight. Because of that, it's considered a machine, even though
Yeah,
you're.
but in order to do it without that, it would be like a dumbbell. You can't do it without one. Like that, it's literally just a bar. There's nothing
No,
else to it.
I know what you're talking about, but it's part of a. There's a pit like I would consider free weight T-bar rows where it's an actual barbell and you're using like a cable extension or like a cable
Yeah,
grip underneath
yeah,
the bar. That's what I
it's
consider free weight.
and
That's
that's
what I
what I'm
consider.
saying. I'm doing. I
Oh,
it's
so
a
you're
it's
not.
a
It's
full
not chest supported T-bar rows.
No,
Okay.
it's a
Okay.
barbell that's just like
Yeah.
on a little pivot in the ground. You plate
Yeah.
load it, and then I grab a narrow
Okay.
grip from essentially from a pull down machine. I go on and grab
Yeah.
that, and I loop that in, and that's what I'm rowing with.
Okay, yeah, then that's free weight. I was thinking
Yes,
you're talking about the
that's
chest supported one. When I said
no.
T-bar row machine, that's what I meant was like the chest supported one that you're kind of standing in. So I'm like, that's technically a machine because it's not free weight. But I know what you're talking about now. Okay, good. So I was wondering that because it says chest supported rows and then it says T-bar rows. So I'm like, are you doing another chest supported row essentially? So you're doing narrow grip T-bar rows, but your progress. So your chest supported row, is that more neutral grip or is that more wide grip?
That is a neutral grip from
Okay.
my last set, just because if you read in the notes, we're focusing the sets 2 and 3 are weight I could move for 12, but only doing for 6 to 8 and focusing on contraction. And neutral grip helps the most, in my personal opinion, with focusing on the contraction at the top of the rep.
Yep.
So that's why I'm doing it neutral grip there. Especially considering it's weight that I'm supposed to be able to move for 12 reps when I'm only doing it for 6 to 8.
Okay. Yeah,
So
I'm looking at.
it's full time under tension discipline. Like we're just building up, focusing on contraction. A lot of my in a lot of the notes, a lot of the muscles or a lot of the notes are focused on not so much on the weight, more so on the contraction and the pump. Like
Right.
especially in the arm exercises, you'll see it there.
Right. So it says here on your body space workout log, it says that you're doing dumbbell incline rows for your chest supported rows. Is that what you're doing?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So the incline, yeah, it's dumbbell on an incline, chest supported.
Interesting. See, I would have done machine chest supported rows. That's just my opinion because you have free weight for your other three movements. So I would have done machine for that. And then you got your T-bar rows, which are really good. That's another reason I want to start going to that other gym is because the gym I go to now doesn't have that pivot for a barbell for me to really lock in. And you got Smith machine barbell rows, and then you got rack pulls. So a lot of rows. You're doing a lot of rows, which makes sense. And rows are for thickness, and then you got your pull downs and you got your rack pulls, which are going to help a little bit with width. So another thing to do too with that pivot that you're talking about, where you put the bar into it, is you can go at it sideways, where the bar is perpendicular to the way you're standing. You can grab the end of the bar and pull it to the side. So it's kind of like wide grip rows essentially, and that's going to help a lot with width. That's the reason why I'm going to go to that other gym is for that. So that's going to help a lot with width. That's going to target your teres major minor, your outer lats. That's going to help a lot with your lat spread, your front double. That's what's going to give that illusion of width when you're doing your front double, and that's why I need to work on that because my width is just not there. Thickness is there.
For what we were just talking about with the T-bar row, um, I think that's one where you can utilize back stretching in a better way than the other. Like we talked about basically the swing motion of the lat pull down and
Yeah.
the seated row. I think the T-bar row is, because of how you're hunched over on it, I think stretching out and like almost giving yourself more space down in the absolute negative and like forcing yourself to go deeper into it, I think is the one, like, because we talked about how so many people do it just because they saw Arnold do it and they're not actually focusing on what they should be doing. Whereas I think with the T-bar row, I think that's one where it's a lot harder to mess up, because if you go deeper into that rep and you have to like, swing your body to move it up, you're already messed up, because you're supposed to be completely stationary, and just dipping your arms in a little bit more allows that little bit more back stretching. So
Yeah.
I think that one is kind of a good stepping stone for people who want to, stretch out their back more with their exercises, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that could be good for stretches, like stretching it out to the max. When you're doing machine versions of it, I recommend against stretching it, because then most likely that just means it's too heavy of weight, because it's going to be chest supported. So if you're stretching out from the weight, then you're not targeting the way you want it to target. So free weight with keeping a strong core and stretching it out, that's totally fine. But if it's chest supported, you don't want to stretch out typically. Sometimes I'll do wide grip rows where I do let my back, stretch out and my arms kind of droop a little bit lower. But that's because I'm targeting specifically the width of my back and not the thickness. So with this T-bar row, since it's close rows, you can absolutely stretch it out because you're going to be targeting the middle of your lats, your rhomboids, and the thickness overall of your back when you're building it. So that you can absolutely stretch out. So moving forward, as far as other movements that a lot of people are familiar with is deadlifts. Deadlifts are very hard to learn. It's something that it's going to take a little while to understand how it works and how to target your back. You're going to be activating a lot of things all at once, especially in the beginning. I also recommend, we were talking about it, how there's better movements than deadlifts. The deadlifts aren't even in your back workout right now.
That's for, so when I, prior to getting the workout plan from coach, he wanted top sets of everything, like just video versions of top sets. So I sent my top sets for everything. And for deadlifts, we both decided that, like, when I sent the video over, I said, "Hey coach, like, I realized that my form's not the best on this top set. I can change that for the better." But he was like, "No, you just have some structural imbalances that we have to work on as we get like more progressed into this workout plan." So
Yeah.
that's why we cut deadlifts and instead replaced it with rack pulls, because you're able to focus on keeping your back completely in that arced formation. I'll send you that video, but of the one that I referenced for coach and
I know
but
what you're talking about. You did send me it.
yeah, I had basically a little bit of a hunch when I was
Yeah, a
trying to
little
get the
rounded
weight
out.
up.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so in order to counteract that, that's why we pulled that and focused more on rack pulls. So then when we do revisit the dead pull movement, my form will be a lot better. And I think that's actually something that is really important for people listening to understand, is that if you have, or if it is very hard for you to get rid of your hunch and really arc your back when you're doing a deadlift, rack pulls is the way to go. Because like Paul was saying earlier, you have it just below the knee, because as you fire upwards from that position, there is no place for your legs to move. It is purely your back. You have that arc and you work on just moving the weight up.
Yeah.
And especially, I'd consider myself seasoned in the gym at this point. And when I did that, I had never, and I can 100% say I have never done rack pulls before yesterday's workout.
Hmm.
And I felt like bliss. I felt great. I could feel every single muscle that I was hitting, and my backs. Specifically, I was getting more of an upper back vibe from if anything, when I was doing them. Um, but that particular movement is something that I think, now that I've done it, I can preach that I think everybody should start with that before even thinking about doing deadlifts. Just because you have such a good opportunity to build a mind muscle connection, really focus on keeping that back arced and like as in the position you want it to be before you move on into deadlifts. Because I approached it from the opposite perspective, because when I got into the gym, ego was still everything. And so deadlift is one of those ones where if you're deadlifting 3 or more plates, you're kind of the big dog in that gym. And so you're like, all right, I'm gonna fucking do this. I'm gonna make sure that people can see me slam this weight down. And you really give up on the form side of things, and that's where you start to have injury and risk for longevity and things for that. So now that I've done it and I've completely like that movement alone solidified my confidence in my new coach. Just him being able to see that top set of my movement, realizing what was going on, and fixing it with an exercise that is going to help me to further my back gains was a beautiful thing for me to be able to experience.
Yeah, it's also easier for you to do something like rack pulls because of your height.
Yeah. Again,
Longer
for anyone
limbs
who's
is going to
listening,
be
I'm 6'4".
yeah, yeah. So it's going to be harder for you to do movements like that. Bench press is another one because your limbs are so long. Uh, so rack pulls can definitely be a lot more help. Um, Deadlifts have their place, they have their use. They're very hard to learn. You have to keep a very straight back. I know plenty of guys who have naturally rounded out backs, just the way they stand, their posture. So learning for me, deadlifts wasn't very hard to learn because I tend to have a pretty straight back when it comes to posture. So I just kind of kept my back straight for the most part. Uh, and then I started to understand it, but it's very, very difficult for a lot of people to learn how to do it. And when you're getting into the heavier stuff, like when you sent me that video, when I was watching it, I was like, okay, maybe it's a little heavy. You could just kind of, the only problem was just that you're rounding out your back a little bit, like with that
Yeah.
set, which isn't the end of the world. But it's like, okay, form's not the best in this set. I know that it's better in other sets. So I think that, in my opinion, all that happened really was just that you went a little bit too heavy. And that happens when I go too heavy on deadlifts, my back rounds out a little bit. And it's just because I'm pushing everything I can through that rep just to get it up. So sometimes form does get compromised, and ideally you don't want that to happen. You don't want to compromise form if you can avoid it. So that's part of bodybuilding, is that if you're going to compromise form, then probably you shouldn't be doing it. Powerlifting, Olympic lifting, stuff like that, where they're going for 1 rep maxes, their form doesn't necessarily.
You do whatever you need to get the weight up if you're doing
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Your form doesn't necessarily matter too much. I mean, obviously, you want to be using proper form to get the weight up because it's going to be easier when you use proper form. But if they round out their back a little bit just to get the weight up and then it's a new PR, that's good enough for them. Where for us, your PR shouldn't even be in your vocabulary. You know, people ask me all the time what my PRs are. And I'm like, dude, I could not care less. Like, I really don't know.
I let the app take care of that now. When people are
Yeah.
like, "Hey, what's your PR?" I'm like, "Let me," because like the Body Space app that I sent you,
Yeah.
it calculates your 1 rep max off of every workout you've done. So I'm like, "You
Yeah.
want to know my PR? There, that's what it is."
I mean, that's just
I'm
like
not going to do it.
that's a rough estimate too. That's not, because like when you're training powerlifting, they do like, percentage of their sets. So they'll do like, let's say like deadlift, to do like 8 sets of deadlifts, but they'll do like a few reps each set, and it's like first set is like 75% of their PR, and they'll do like 2 reps, and then second set's like 80% of their PR, and then 85, 90, 95, 98, 99, and then they'll do 100% of their rep, or 100% of their PR, go for 1, and they'll do like 101% and go for 1. Like that's how they do their sets. So with us, we're taxing the muscle in a very different way. So fatigue plays a much bigger role in what we're trying to do. So the my app that I use, which is rep count, that also targets my 1 rep max. And the rule of thumb, if you're getting, let's say you completely failed at 8 reps, your 8 rep max times 1.225 is your, in quotations, 1 rep max. And that's just a rule of thumb. It's not necessarily 100% accurate. It's just like a general idea. So if you deadlift 3 plates for 8, um, then let me do the calculations here. So that's 315, right? Three plates is 315.
Yep.
Times 1.225. So it's technically your 1 rep max should be around 386 pounds, which is like, it's 3 plates and then
25, 25 on
35, a
35.
35
Yeah.
on each side. That's your 1 rep max hypothetically. So that doesn't necessarily mean that that is your 1 rep max. It's just like based off that, and statistically it should be around that point is your 1 rep max. But if you went for a 1 rep max after that set, you're going to be fucking fried and you're not going to be able to get it. So 1 rep max or PR should just really not be in your vocabulary. I'm going to go grab some more coffee. I'll be right back.
Yeah. And I think something that Paul is really focusing on when he says that is that for us, Paul and I were in the bodybuilding world, and the majority of our listeners are probably in some aspect of the bodybuilding world or in the advanced side of the lifestyle fitness. So when we're talking about not PRing, that's not just because one, it doesn't really do much for us because we're again focusing so much on muscle contraction, we're focusing so much on time under tension and making sure that we're building mind muscle connection. But it also puts us at a higher risk of injury because we don't do it all that often, and it's not really something that we need to be doing because it's just a lot of weight all at once. Whereas for us, we're focused on muscle volume and building our muscle size more and more. So when we avoid that PR, it allows us to instead fill that time with a higher volume or just, our 8 to 12, whatever your particular set is going for a rep range. Because again, we're focusing more and more on the contraction and the constant contraction. That's what time under tension is. It's just you consistently contracting your muscle and taking your time with it so that you can feel it as you go through the positive and the negative of each rep. And so a PR you could get that thing, like for example, a PR on deadlift. You could struggle with that thing for near 30 seconds before you get to the top. And that really does nothing for us in the bodybuilding world
For
because
hypertrophy.
because for us, if we're going to take 30 seconds on a rep, which I can't think of unless you're doing a like holdout rep, but the only time that I can think, or I can't think of any time, because for us, that amount of time should be spent thinking about the muscle and how it's contracting with a comfortable weight so that we can actually feel the muscle contracting and doing what it's supposed to do. But if you're PRing and you're taking that much time, you almost black out from moving that much weight and trying to. So that's why it kind of defeats the purpose on the bodybuilding side of things, because we are so focused on our looks and how our muscles when you're focused on your looks, you care more about your muscle in the moment and in under tension, not about the move, about the weight you can move. So that's why PRs are kind of dispelled from our vocabularies. It's cool to say, yeah, I PR'd 4 or 5 on a deadlift. Like, cool. It's cool to say that, but in reality, for us in the world of shaping our bodies to be the best that you can, it really does nothing for us. So that's kind of what Paul means by all that.
Yeah, and um, there's a saying, I think I've said it before in this podcast, is powerlifters, their goal is to move as much weight as easy as possible. Our goal is to move little weight as hard as possible, essentially. Like, we want it to be as hard as possible to move the weight. We want it to be very difficult. We want it to hurt. Powerlifters want to move as much weight as possible, as easy as they can. That's their goal. They want to move the weight. That's their goal, is to finish the rep, is to get as much weight up as possible. So that's the differences there. Hypertrophy and powerlifting don't really go hand in hand. Strength will come from muscle size, which I've said before. Strength will come from muscle size. It indirectly gets affected. Your strength does get affected when your muscle size grows, but a guy who's the same weight and same look as me, who focused on strength, is going to be much stronger. But they're not going to look the same as me. If they have the same weight and same muscle mass, they're not going to look the exact same that I do if they're focusing on strength. Their overall build is going to be completely different. So that's something to just keep in mind. I mean, with a lot of beginners will have PR in their vocabulary, and you want to take that out. Like we've said, leave your ego at the door. That's the goal. You don't want to have your ego play a role at all in the gym. But with that being said, deadlifts is a good movement. Just don't think about PRs. I mean, deadlifts, you do 10 plus reps for deadlifts. That's fucking hard. That shit is so tiring. It just fries your nervous system.
But
So
that's why it's such a good movement because
it can
it's
be.
well, yeah, and it's a compound movement. For those who don't know, compound movement, activates more than just one muscle,
Mhm.
and that's what a deadlift is really good for. Because we mentioned how in the absolute bottom of the rep, it's your legs that get it started, then it progresses into your back, and then all the way up into your upper back. Your arms are activated, your forearms are having to grip that much weight. Like, it is an overall really good thing to hit a lot of different muscles, but again, you have to be focused on doing a lot of reps because a lot of reps is fucking tough on deadlifts. It
Yeah, it's
really
a
is.
lot.
Even on low weight, which is why leaving the ego out there, because like honestly for me right now, I think if I was to do two plates for me is only moving, like two plates on a side is only moving for, 10 to maybe 15, because after like 8 or so, I'm sitting there going, motherfucker, why am I still doing this?
Mhm.
And that's the kind of burnout that you want to be able to achieve, and you can't do that on a PR.
Yeah. Yeah, you wanna go to you literally can't lift the weight anymore for your failed rep, whatever it is. I mean, first couple sets, you don't want to go complete failure. That's my opinion. I usually back is usually 8 to 14 reps. Usually, I do my first set. Target around 14 reps, not complete failure. Maybe like a few reps off failure, and then stop. 12 is the same thing. 12 reps, a few reps off failure, but then like 8 and 10, I'm trying to go till complete failure. If 10 goes closer to 12, then 8 goes closer to 10, then that means I need to go up in weight, especially for the next week. So that's what the progressive overload is going to be. That's the way I target it. Is I base it off of mainly my top set. If 8 goes closer to 10, then I move up the weight overall for everything essentially, or I just move up just the top set. It depends. So, if my third set, so let's say I'm doing 4 sets of deadlifts, I want to go 14, 12, 10, 8. That's my goal for all 4 sets. Sometimes I'll do a drop set, which I just go to the complete failure, which I'll write down whatever it is. But let's say I'm targeting 10 for my middle set. If it's 10 for my middle set, but then it's like 9 for my top set, I would just adjust the top set because clearly I just had a little bit more in the tank when it came to hitting that top set. So I just need to adjust my top set. But if I'm getting closer to 12 for my middle set, and then my top set's closer to 10, I might even do a fifth set. I'm like, wow, okay, I'm feeling, I've gotten some strength in there. I've built it up a bit. So let me go ahead and add maybe 10 more pounds each side for deadlifts. Then I'll go for 8. And then if I get 8 or less, then I'm like, okay, like ideally I want to get more than 7. Like if I get 7 and some change, perfect. If I get 8, perfect. But anything past 8 is like, okay, maybe I need to adjust a little bit. But then going to the next week, I'll adjust the middle set and adjust the top set. So it's back to 4 sets where I'm failing at 10 and 8. That's essentially how I do progressive overload. Everybody's a little bit different. Some people just base off the top set. Some people go to failure on pretty much every set. And then just when they go up a rep in every movement, then they adjust the weights to go back down a rep, then up a rep, then back down, so on and so forth. It just depends on however you want to target your progressive overload. But ideally, you want to be changing. If you're maintaining or putting on weight, you want to go up a rep or go up in weight every time you lift from the previous week or from the previous day that you're hitting. So that's what you want to be doing. That's progressive overload. So deadlifts is a good example of that. I'll do deadlifts maybe once a month to kind of test where my strength is at in comparison to the last time I did deadlifts. So if I did deadlifts right now, I'd probably get a decent amount out because I have carbs in my system versus when I didn't have carbs in my system. So uh, that plays a huge role. Your carbs is going to play a huge role. Your energy is going to play a huge role in something like your deadlifts. And that's why it's also key to put deadlifts towards the end or something very, very heavy compound like your rack pulls are very important to have at the end because it's going to fry your nervous system. Your nervous system is going to play a huge role in how much you're actually lifting and what you're going to be doing within the movement. Squats is very, very hard on your nervous system. I put squats towards the beginning. It sets a good foundation for the rest of my movements. But at the same time, it's like if you put squats at the end, you're going to be lifting less, but you're going to be stronger throughout the rest of your workout that you had after your squats. So it just depends on how you wanted to utilize it. I think deadlifts shouldn't be in every single week. I think that, in my opinion, I think it's a good test of strength in your overall body. I think that for back, you can target your back for a lot of it. One thing to mention too is that rack pulls or deadlifts when you're at the top and you round out your shoulders, That's going to help build your rhomboids because you're going to pull your scapula together a little bit. And it's also going to build your teres major and minor to build that ball in your back. So that's going to help with that too. All you're doing is when you're at the top of the rep, instead of keeping your shoulders more forward or at least more parallel, you're going to roll them back and kind of stretch out your chest. And then you're going to squeeze, and that's going to hold the weight up for you. I mean, your grip is going to need to grip it, but you're going to hold up the weight from that, not from your overall body, not your core. And then you go back down, you let your shoulders round back out, then you do the deadlift and come back up, and then you roll your shoulders out again. That's going to help with, like I said, the rhomboids and teres major minor, something to add in there. And then to build thickness, just keep doing more rows, which you're already doing stuff. You're doing plenty of rows, but rows is going to build thickness. And then anything wide grip is going to help with the width. You talked.
I think even like not even doesn't have to be wide grip, but just any kind of lat pull down or pull ups. I think that will build your width. Doesn't even have to, I mean, yes, wide grips absolutely, but I'm saying even just standard grip, like standard uh standard width, I guess the term is I'm going for it, but on a pull down, that too will build your width.
Yeah, just shoulder width pull downs will
Yeah.
help. Pull downs will help with width. You could narrow pull downs will target more of your middle of your back than your outer lats. Dorian Yates, he never did anything wide grip. There's an interview he had, or he posted to Twitter once. He showed his lat spread and he said not one wide grip pull down was done in building this. You got to pull narrow. I'm a huge advocate for narrow pull downs. I think narrow pull downs are amazing. You can target your back in any kind of way you want. So one of the things that I mentioned, mind muscle connection is very important, is when you're doing narrow grip pull downs or narrow rows, ideally really narrow grip pull downs, you can target any muscle in your back you want, specifically by the way you're gripping the grip or the attachment. So narrow grip pull downs, typically you have a neutral grip or your palms are facing each other. The way I train people, if I'm training with someone and they're doing narrow grip, what I'll have them do typically is scoot their hands closer to them on the attachment, and then they'll pull from their first finger and their middle finger. I'll tell them to pull from those and have their thumb typically on the outside of the grip. What that's going to do is going to target more of your middle of your back. It's going to help with a lot more thickness. If you wanted to target more outer back, you're going to want to scoot your elbows out more and pull from your middle finger and your ring finger towards the middle of the attachment, and that's going to help more with width. So it's the way you grip bars, the way you grip the attachments, the way you pull it can entirely change the movement. Something to keep into account when you're doing anything. When you don't have the mind muscle connection, you want to do it properly based off of what the general idea of the movement is. So if you're doing narrow grip pull downs, just keep the neutral grip, keep pulling from your middle fingers right in the middle of the grip and keeping your elbows kind of out a little bit. But for me, because I can target it in a different way, I have other people do it a different way, and they're like, "Wow, okay, this makes it completely different, and I like it this way now." But you have to have that mind muscle connection. So I'll only ever tell people to do that when I'm lifting with someone who's been lifting for a while, who can target specific muscle. Like when you know you have a good mind muscle connection with your back, you can flex different muscles in your back. Like I can flex my lower lats right now. I can flex my rhomboids, my teres major minor. Your my lats in general, my lower back, just by sitting here. So if you have that connection, then you can make it burn in any muscle you want, as bad as you want it to burn. My back burns so fucking bad on back day. Not quite like legs. Legs is more of like a pain, but like this is more of like a good burn. Like back is like a good burn. Kind of like arms when you're really contracting a bicep curl, it burns. It's kind of like that. So you want it to burn. And the way you attach the grip, the way you grip it is going to play a huge role. Definitely.
100% of our listeners, including myself, in that moment while you're going, just sat there trying to flex each of their muscles in their back.
Can I do it? Can I do it?
Oh, there's the
Well, I can
lower
feel it
one.
a little bit. Yeah, it's cool too when you're able to flex it like that. Like when I go into lat pull downs and I can flex my lower lats, it's like whoa! I can feel exactly where my lower lats are. It's fucking wild.
I was trying to be subtle with it. I was trying not to be too obvious when I was sitting here trying to.
Oh, I didn't notice it. Yeah, I didn't notice it.
That's just all I could think about. But
Yeah.
I'm going to throw another exercise out there that is a personal favorite of mine for building middle of the back. So again, we're kind of progressively getting higher and higher, but we're consistently talking about width and size and whatnot. But one of my personal favorites for building size in your middle back is single arm cable rows. So not just we have our narrow grip seated rows that we do, but I
Yeah.
like to do single arm ones because when you do a single arm, one, it's very humbling because you're not able to move as much weight.
Yeah.
Two, I like to be able to, and many of us have this, many who have like a dominant hand, there's a little bit of an imbalance. So, like, for example, I know that my right side is stronger than my left side just
Hmm.
from all my sports history and doing everything as a right handed dominant person. Whereas when you do a single arm cable row, you're able to progressively increase maybe the reps a little bit on a side that you're weaker on to kind of try and work on that imbalance a little bit. And
Hmm.
that's not to say that you should be like, that's not saying like on my right side I can move 60 and my left side I can move 55 and I'm splitting the weight. You're still doing the same weight, just you might
Hmm.
want to try and squeeze out an extra rep or two on the side that you know is not as strong. And that's what I think any kind of single arm movement does, but specifically single arm seated rows helps you to do that for the middle of your back because the middle of the back is where you're driving most of your force from. So I
Hmm.
think that that's a um, really undervalued exercise because 9 times out of 10, when someone sits down at a seated row, they're grabbing the narrow grip and going to that, or they're going for a wide grip and just doing that with their seated rows. I see so few people doing single arm seated rows. So I think
I
that's kind
do.
of one to kind of focus on.
I do them as well. You're going to have imbalances. That's going to happen. You could be
Oh,
the
yeah.
most advanced lifter. You could be lifting your whole life, and you're going to have imbalances. That's going to happen.
Well,
Um,
look at the picture of Sebum from this past Olympia. His
yeah.
left bicep, like it was like without any edits, you could see a clear difference in size, and he
Well,
does a
that's
really
just
good job of hiding it. But
well, he tore his left bicep. That's why he did come out about it.
yeah,
He did talk about it and talk about what happened. I haven't watched the video yet. I mean, it was clearly obvious he tore it, and he hid it from everybody. He hid the. I don't know
which
how
isn't,
he did it.
but that's insane at the highest level where you're being judged so scrutinally. Like that's absurd to be able to hide something like that and still come out on top.
Well, I mean, it didn't look bad. We just noticed it was more rounded
No, I
out. It
know,
wasn't as
I
much of a
know.
peak. I'm saying he hid it from like the public when it happened, which is
Oh, okay.
astounding. Like we didn't even know anything happened until the show, and like that's a bitch to heal. Like that takes a long ass time for that shit to heal, and you're in like a sling a lot of the time, and you got bandages and whatnot, and it usually requires surgery, especially if you tear it clean from the tendon or the bone. It requires surgery. So it's like the fact that he supposedly went through a tear and like we didn't even know is astounding. But to continue on that, you're going to have imbalances. It's going to happen, and it's not the end of the world. You just don't want it to the point where, like you said, you don't want to be doing two different weights per side. A couple reps, like for my imbalance, my left side of my back is a little bit weaker than my right, even though I'm more left dominant than anything. But just my back is like my legs, for instance, my left leg is a bit stronger than my right, and I can feel it. But it's the difference of like how tough the last couple reps are is kind of where I'm at. So like if I'm doing single arm cable rows, you know, I can feel it in. So like let's say I get like 10 reps out of my right. I do like 9 reps and I'm about to fail 10, even though I got 10 no problem on my right side. That's kind of how it feels for me. I can lift the same weight. It's just the difficulty of it is going to be a little bit different. And that's going to happen. And then single arm cable rows also target a lot of your core too, because you have to keep your body straight. You have to keep your chest straight. You have to keep it parallel to the movement. Where if you're doing, 2 arm cable rows of some sort, you don't have to worry about that because both sides are working. So for me, the way I do it is um, I kind of round out my back a little bit and kind of lean into the movement. So let's say I'm doing the right side. I'll stretch it all the way out and let my hand go parallel to the ground. And then when I contract, I'll stretch my back out, keep my hip kind of flexed, and then make it so that my hands parallel or perpendicular to the ground, and then I squeeze my outer lat, and then I stretch it back out with my hips still kind of flexed in, and then I squeeze it back in. And a lot of times, something that'll help with your back too is if you can reach it, is touch whatever you're working on. So like I'm doing it freaking right now without even realizing it. I'm touching the lat as I'm doing it with no weight, and I could
Well,
feel
that's
exactly.
that's also a stability thing when you do any kind of single arm movements. Like
Yeah,
for me, this is not back, but when I do a single arm lat raise, I'm holding the bottom of my lat when I do that, and that's just a stability thing.
yeah.
But it'll yeah, and I did my best to hold in my laughter, but uh, you say it's activating core. Sounds like a time for my belt.
Yeah, God, no. Just because it's activating your core does not mean you grab your belt.
anytime, anytime I do anything that's core, and you said core is
Oh,
everything, so
it activated
therefore I wear my belt during cardio.
standing curls. It activates my core. I'm wearing my belt. I'm grabbing my shoelace.
for for a rule of thumb, since we're talking about back, and I know I mentioned it earlier, but if any other muscle movement you're doing activates your lower back, you are doing that movement wrong.
Pretty
Like
much.
if you are benching and somehow feel it in your lower back, you are doing it wrong.
You're doing
Somehow
something
you're doing
very
a bench
wrong.
wrong.
Yeah, you're doing it very wrong. It's that should not be happening. Um, yeah, your lower back. The only times it should ever really activate by accident is back movements and leg movements. Really, that's just about it. But yeah, that's how I do my single arm cable rows. At least I don't really focus a lot on dumbbell rows. I'm not the biggest fan of dumbbell rows. Personally, my body just doesn't ergonomically agree with it that much. Just
You
like my
said you don't
balance.
like dumbbell rows, you said?
Yes, I'm not the like I don't trash on them. They're amazing. It's just for me they don't work as well as, barbell rows or
Mm.
chest supported rows or something like that. It's just not my biggest I'm not the biggest fan of it. Dumbbells, I do a lot of work with dumbbells, just specifically just not on back really. Um, but that's just me. And a lot of a lot of my movements as far as so for chest, back, and legs, a lot of my movements really are end up being focused on. So like back is a lot of cable work. I do a lot of cable work, and then legs is a lot of machine work for the most part. Some free weight. Obviously, you can't really do. I mean, as a guy, you can't really do much with cables. Really, the only thing you can do with cables is like for legs is like kickbacks and abductor movements or adductor movements. That's about it. But I don't really bother with that. I do a lot of machine work and a little bit of free weight. Um, but back has a lot of cables and a couple machines and a couple free weights, just not dumbbells. But like dumbbells have their place. I do a lot of dumbbell work with shoulders. I do a lot of dumbbell work with biceps. So that's just how my body works, at least ergonomically. It's just back just really agrees with cables and it really agrees with machinery. I do some free weight here and there. It might be rack pulls or maybe reverse grip rows, but that's about it. Just because I think chest supported rows have a better place within hypertrophy than barbell rows do. That's just my opinion. That's just what I've noticed is that I can get a lot more out of a machine row than I can out of a barbell row, and it's also just better for your overall joints and your bones and all of that to do something chest supported. That's just my opinion. But and as his plates, like the T-bar rows you have, phenomenal movement.
Oh yeah.
Underhand or overhand barbell rows are amazing movements. It's just I don't typically target it too much just because there's other movements I feel that I respond better to. So you got to listen to your body and listen to how your body responds to different movements after some consistency. I mean, you should be doing the same movements for like 8 to 12 weeks and then change out a movement and be like, okay, I've noticed this difference now and I've noticed this difference. But then again, this also requires stick sticking to a strict meal plan, sticking to good sleep and all of that to really start noticing differences when you are lifting differently. Uh, that's something to take into account too. So you want to be consistent with all of your movements and progressively overloading.
For me, for working back, there's one exercise that a lot of people really do and love it, and I will absolutely preach it. It's just like you said, one of those things that just doesn't, agree with your body. Rear flies, like a machine rear fly. Um,
For rear delts,
y- uh, Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Well, you could even target it into your upper lats. Not
Yeah,
really,
we could
just the
target
interior.
your
Well, that's more
rhomboids and
rhomboids.
traps.
Yeah,
Yeah.
rhomboids.
Yeah, you can do that a little
So,
bit.
but that's something that a lot of people like to do for back, and I preach it because I think that you can get a lot of individual muscle definition from doing that because of how you are tightening and contracting at the top of the rep. But it's just something for me that just doesn't. I cannot reach where I need to be getting for that particular set. Sorry, not set for that movement. Like you said, it just doesn't. Some exercises just don't agree, and that's where once again it comes into play when Paul and I talk about all this stuff on this podcast. You can test out every single one, and if 90% of them work and then 10% of them don't keep trying the 10% because
Mhm.
get yourself to a point where maybe those will work in the future. Don't just push through it even if your body doesn't agree with it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you gotta test and see what works for you at the end of the day, and that's very important. Back is very very subjective. What works and what doesn't. Uh, I know someone whose back very much agrees with dumbbell movements, dumbbell rows, incline dumbbell rows, stuff like that. And I just don't get the same movements. I mean, if I do incline dumbbell rows, I feel like I'm just fucking wasting my time. It's just like it's like either the weight is super easy and super light for me to lift, or it's like I can't get a rep. It's just the way my body's built. It just doesn't agree with it. Um, One thing I love to do is I love Smith rows, but the problem with a lot of Smith machines is that the stopper at the very bottom is not low enough for rows, and that's really fucking frustrating because I want to get down to my lower than my kneecap, but like the stopper will have it like above my kneecap, and that drives me fucking nuts. So that's a problem that I have. If your Smith machine goes a lot lower, then that's great. I think Smith machine barbell rows are amazing. Um, you can really, focus on just pulling the weight and focusing on contracting and stretching versus having to balance the bar. Unlike free weight, where free weight you have to balance the bar and balance your grip and all of that. Uh, that's why I love the barbell rows. But Smith machines they're all so built differently. It's just so fucking frustrating sometimes. And it's like, I don't understand why they stop so high. Like the Smith machines at the Golds I go to, the stopper is so high up that you can't do rows. You have to grab like a bench or something to stand on to do fucking rows. I'm like, why? Like, why is this stop 2 feet, 3 feet off the fucking ground? Like, can we do like a foot? At least that way it won't crush you if you're underneath it. But like, I don't know. I like it's just, to me, it's like it gets really frustrating. So I don't really typically bother with a Smith machine unless I know that it goes all the way down to where I want it to go. But I think Smith machine barbell rows are amazing, which I know is part of your program right now. But I think they're really, really good, especially underhand.
Yeah, for this past week, like I hit back yesterday. We're still in the New Year's rush, and Empire actually got slammed pretty good with the New Year's rush. I was talking with
Yeah.
Megan, one of the girls that works there, and she said that 19 people joined, and so on top of the normal crowd that's
Really?
there, it's a lot of people. Yeah, it was.
Wait,
I was very
19?
surprised.
That doesn't sound like a lot.
So it's not a lot when you consider it over a 24-hour span, but most people are going during, gym rush, which is
Is
between
that what
6 and
she was
8.
saying? Between 6 and 8 is a lot of the time.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
See, 19,
that's also my experience.
yeah, 19 at once is one thing. 19 throughout the day, I don't know. I'm just like,
Yeah,
eh.
but it's
But
it's it's focused in because that's when people are getting off work or whatever. But
yeah, my New Year's rush is finally fucking over. They're all gone now, which is awesome.
yeah.
But
But
proceed. Go ahead.
the point being is that uh like Paul mentioned in my plan, I'm supposed to be doing Smith machine bent over rows. And yesterday there was a group of, I think it was three gals who, if a, this has nothing to do, no biases. There is a lot more that they can do on a Smith machine. But when a group of girls goes to a Smith machine, you can kiss that thing goodbye for the next half hour to 45 minutes. And that's
Yeah.
just a combination of them having so many different exercises they do on a Smith machine, and also the fact that they there's just a lot more time taken during that time. So I saw that happen. I actually texted my coach mid lift, and I was like, "Hey man, I am not going to be able to do Smith machine things because we only have one Smith machine at Empire." And
Yeah.
he said, yeah, that's fine. Substitute it for regular barbell,
Yeah.
plate loaded. Go over and like go. You have a mirror there. Make sure you're doing it. And of course, I did end up like I talked to Paul before we started recording that I didn't think my form was all that great, and I activated it more like a shoulder shrug. So for next week when I go back into it, I know that I have to adjust and um, you know move on from there. But I was not able to activate it with the Smith machine, which frustrated me a little bit because the Smith machine does. I know we have our arguments against Smith machine for a variety of different purposes, but one thing it does do really well is provide that stability. And when you're first coming into a new exercise, like I don't do a lot of barbell rows. I've done or bent over barbell rows. I do bent over dumbbell rows, but that's an entirely different thing, especially when you're thinking about what your grip you're using. So moving into a barbell one, I really wanted to utilize that Smith machine for the first couple of weeks of doing it so then I could really get the movement down. And that wasn't possible. So I'm hoping that next week when I get into my back day, I'm able to utilize that. But for any kind of movement that we talk about, I recommend if it's your first time ever doing it, finding either a machine or Smith machine or cable version of it before doing a free weight version, just because you want, like we've talked about with deadlifts, you want to get the form right before anything else. Before you can add any kind of serious weight, you got to get the form right. And that's where these essentially assistive technology comes in to help.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I'm glad that you mentioned that because that was something that my coach mentioned to me. He's like, I need you to be consistent on the movements, and I'm like, believe me, I want to be consistent on these movements, but when with the New Year's rush, I'm like, it's so fucking crazy sometimes. Like my leg day 2 weeks ago, because my leg day last week I hit at the new gym, but 2 weeks ago I was doing leg day and I was going to do a fifth movement. So I usually do about 5 or 6 movements at the max, and I was going to do a fifth movement, which was leg curls. And then I was going to call it a day. I was going to finish off with leg curls. Uh, I looked at the leg curl machines. Every single one of them was being used. I'm like, are you fucking like so many leg machines weren't being used, but every single leg curl machine, which is three of them, all three of them were being used. I'm like, fuck it. I'm leaving. I'm like, I'm not going to wait for this shit because this is my last movement and I'm done. I'm like, I'm already pretty toast. I was just going to squeeze out every bit I had left in leg curls, but I'm like, I'm fucking over it. I'm so done with waiting. Um, like we said in our news resolution episode is respect. I have respect for anybody who wants to make differences or make changes in their life. Great. The
Absolutely.
problem
Yep.
is the people who most likely know they're not going to stick with it, but they're going to try, but then just leave. And it's like if you know you're not going to be able to do it and you're not going to put in the effort to keep consistent with it, you're just wasting everybody's time. And that was the problem that I had was that like I'm like I don't even know if these people are going to be fucking here in a week.
Hmm.
And like I have to cut my leg day short. Not that I had to, I could have done other things, but like I just got frustrated because I'm like I have one movement left. They've been open this entire time and now they go to do it, they're fucking gone. Like they're all being used. I'm like, this is frustrating. So I told him, I was like, yeah, I know I need to be consistent. I get that 100%. I'm on board. It's just, I was like, it's going to be easier with New Year's kind of dying down a bit, and which has died down a lot. I noticed it the other day. I was at Gold's for Friday's arm day, and I was fucking pretty much dead in comparison to what it used to be. So it's pretty much over at this point, which is typically what ends up happening 2 or 3 weeks into January is when you start seeing a lot less people. You start seeing the regulars again. So now that that's gone, I could be a bit more consistent. But one thing that you mentioned that I'm glad you mentioned was when you're doing a movement and let's say it is being occupied or something like that, doing a different variation of it will still kind of complete your day. It'll still target the same muscles. It'll work the same. The only difference is that you don't know whether or not you got progressive overload. But if you have hit that movement in the past, then just look back at what you did last time and be like, okay, this was 3 weeks ago. I'm probably a little bit stronger. Let's go up like, let's say it's pin loaded machine. Let's go up like 2 more pins on each movement and see how it is. That's how I do it. The app that I use, which is Rep Count, what I'm able to do is I'm able to create movements within the app. And when I need to change out a movement, I can say, okay, for this workout, I'm going to change out this movement and replace it with something else. And when I replace it, it loads up my previously used reps and sets so that I can see it and be like, okay, this is what I did last time. So now I can change out these numbers to hit it this way. So I really like that app. No diss on any other app. It's just for me, Rep Count works the best. I also pay the $5 a month or whatever it is for the graphs and like the 1 rep max tracking and everything like that. So I can actually look at my progressive overload for specific movements over time. Which is really, really good. And I can also export all of my weights and movements as a CSV, which is a Excel file or a Google Sheets file. But it's replacing it with something that's similar is not going to necessarily hurt you. It's not the end of the world. But if you like cutting it out, that's when it kind of hurts you. I cut out the ham at the leg curls at the end of the day because I got frustrated. But like, let's say, I wanted to do leg curls on my third movement and they're all being used. I'll just go do something else. I'll go do the next movement, and push those towards the end. So, that's also why sometimes I'm not consistent. It's because, let's say it's like the one preacher curl machine at Gold's. I'm like, okay, it's being used right now. I'll use it later. I'll do another movement. And then I'll look back. It's still being used by somebody else. Then I'll do another movement. I'll look back, still being used. I'm like, fuck it. I'm not even doing it. I'm just going to go home because I'm like, it's being used this entire time. And I've been waiting and somebody else takes it right when that other person gets up. I'm fucking over it. So that's why I cut out movements sometimes, but you shouldn't be doing that. It's just something that for me, I'm just like, I'm fucking done dealing with it. I'm done getting upset about it. I'm just going to go home or do cardio or something and call it a day.
It's your burning bush moment.
Yeah, it's
from the Bible. That's the message. Burning bush. Don't do it.
Yeah, I tell my coach I rage quit. Like when I like part of my notes that day when I didn't do the leg curls, I was like, all the leg curl. I was going to finish off with leg curls, but all of them were being used, and it was their first set from what I can tell. And I just rage quit. I'm like, I'm not waiting for leg curl machine, for 3 sets that I'm probably not even going to be really like doing the craziest amount for, So I just called it. But it can be frustrating. I can understand if it's frustrating if somebody's using a machine, for they're all being used. Like there's this dude the other day, I was doing chest last week at Gold's and fucking somebody was using a barbell bench with dumbbells. I'm like, bro, that's not what it's for. There's a bar on the bench.
No.
Like stop. Like do it on the fucking floor or something. Like, or wait, or do a machine. Like that bench is for barbell bench presses. I was going to use that machine, but now I can't. Because no other option is there. There's no other option for me to I can't grab a bar and go do it on a regular bench. That's not how that works. You have to be able to rack the weight. But he's using dumbbells when you can use literally like anything else.
See, now you have the image in my head of you just walking over with a bar, going into a regular bench in front of like the mirrors and everything where all the free weights are and just going to town. And when you're done with it, just launching it behind your head.
Yeah, just drop it right behind me like skull crushers or something.
And then walk around with your invisible lats.
Yeah, just spread out my arms like a little bitch. Yeah, that would be funny. But it's just I'm just like the dude was a regular. I've seen him plenty of times, but I'm like, why? Like, there's no reason to be using that for that. Like, do not use dumbbells on a barbell bench press machine. Like on the bench, I mean, like that's so pointless. So it gets frustrating when you have to deal with stuff like that.
I'll say that for back especially, back is kind of versatile in the sense that if, for example, we talked about seated rows, for example, and how that's targeting the middle of your back. Hypothetically, if like Empire, for example, has 2 seated row machines, a third if you kind of format it weird. If all of them were taken, you could just go do a free weight version and just target it with where you're driving your elbow. Like,
yeah,
your back's one of the ones where, since it's such a big muscle group, the machines or setups that you use to target muscle groups can be achieved doing other things as well.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that makes back day so enjoyable for me, is that if something's taken, I can just go do something else. Like I mentioned how the ladies were, gang banging the fucking Smith machine. So I'm going to go over to a free barbell and just do my work that. And if the ladies were gang banging the Smith machine and some dudes were pounding a barbell, I could go to the free weights and do bent over rows with dumbbells. So there's a lot of versatility that you can do when you're trying to hit back, which makes it a really enjoyable muscle group to hit. And on top of that, you're able to, this is me personally, I feel like I'm able to burn out the muscles in my back a lot more efficiently than a different muscle. Like for me, it's easy for me to do arms, it's hard for me to do chest, but back is one of the ones where I know that I can get a really good workout in every single time I try and hit back because of my knowledge of the gym and being able to do, the alternate exercises, and
Mhm.
really focusing on contraction. So that obviously comes with mind muscle connection. So you might not have this ability, but once you spend some time in the gym, like get a year under your belt, you're going to be able to really enjoy your lifts when it comes to. And again, everybody has their own muscle groups. I just tend to enjoy back more.
Yeah, back's one of my favorite days as well. One thing I want to mention that what you said was sometimes the machines aren't as interchangeable as you want them to be. So sometimes,
Mm,
a row machine, one row machine can be completely different than another row machine. It just depends on what the machine is targeting specifically. There's high row machines, even low row machines. There's wide grip row machines that have completely different like grip attachments, like the way the actual grip is worked. It targets differently. So be careful with machines as far as interchangeability. But if you're gonna use a machine for something and then it's being occupied, there is a barbell, cable, or dumbbell alternation probably that you can do, especially for back. There's a definitely a free weight or cable version that you can do instead of the machine. But you don't want to do a completely different movement. There's thinking about the golds I go to. There's a low row machine I use most of my back days, but I can't, if it's being used, I can't replace that with a high row machine because that's going to target my lats completely differently. Even though it's still a row machine, it's going to target differently. So, alternate it or switch it out for something that's equivalent. So if somebody's using the low row machine, what I could do is go do like underhand barbell rows or go do like single arm cable rows where I'm leaning further back or something. Or you can even do like 45-degree reverse grip lat pull downs, which is also really good lower lat movement. You lean further back at a 45-degree angle. You're leaning pretty far back. You do reverse grip and then you pull the bar to your upper abs. That's going to target your lower lats. So like there's different variations of movements that you can do instead of something that's being occupied. If every single dumbbell is being used for like lateral raises, go use a lateral raise machine if that's not being used, or go do cable lateral raises, something like that. There's going to be a different variation. Obviously, you got to keep track of the weights properly, but I think that's why I like apps like mine that allows me to change out the movements and create my own in there because I know what it is. It doesn't necessarily mean that like somebody else can use it. Like if I said X cross triceps, I know what that is, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you know what it is. So like I'm not going to tell people to put in what I put in, but for me, I'm like, okay, so this is what I did last time. And my notes say X, Y, and Z. So clearly I need to adjust it accordingly to this or whatever. So that's just something to take into account is that when you're logging your reps and you're logging your weights and all of that, just use whatever is ideal for you to keep track of whatever you're going to be doing in the future. That could be an Excel file on your phone. That could be a notebook. That could be, an app on your phone. I just also recommend that you log everything. I used to just remember and I had a general idea of where I was at last time. But if you're doing, fucking chest flies and you don't hit it for another week, like you barely remember. Like you could have amazing memory. You could barely remember what you did. Like, do you really remember how that set went? Like, and exactly what weight, exactly what reps, and how you squeezed it out, and exactly how it went. Like, you probably don't remember that. You might remember the weight, maybe, but that's about it. So log it. Just take the second to log it. It sucks. I hate logging weight and reps and stuff. It takes me away from the movement. It takes my mind out of whatever I'm doing, but it keeps you consistent. It keeps you doing progressive overload. So something to take into account. And then if you're working with a coach, just ask and be like, yo, can I send you my work? Like, even if he's not asking you or she's not asking you to do it, just be like, hey, I wish I asked this sooner. I said, hey, I wish I'd have asked, can I send my weights and movements and stuff and see what you think? And, if you have any recommendations on how to change it out, then let me know. That's exactly what a coach is for. My coach doesn't necessarily write my workouts for me. Um, he trusts that I know what I'm doing when it comes to lifting. He just makes suggestions here and there. He even sent, when an athlete of his moved to Charlotte, he said, "Hey, go lift with Paul. He knows what he's doing. He works out really hard. Just go lift with him." So, that's going to come with experience. It's going to come with knowledge. But taking those videos and watching your form and stuff like that, especially if you lift alone, is very important. Lifting alone, I've lifted alone pretty much my entire life for the most part. I've had training partners here and there, but nothing consistent for the long term. And so I know what it's like lifting alone and what you have to, like, different struggles you have and different problems that you have. And one of them is form. And because nobody tells me if my form's wrong, nobody tells me if something's uneven. So take those videos. There's an app that I use. Let me check my phone real quick. There's an app that I use called Iron Path. If you have iPhone, it's probably on Android too. I have iPhone. I used to have Android. It's probably an Android. It's called Iron Path. What that's going to do is when you take a video of, let's say, like squats or deadlifts or something, anything with a bar, you set up your phone so that it's watching the bar. And what you do in that app is you load up the video, you put where the center of the plate is, and what that's going to do is going to trace a line right where the bar is moving. So that's going to give you an idea of what your form looks like. I can see in the video how my form looks in deadlifts. It looks fine. But when I watch the video, I'm like, okay, I went a little heavy on this. So therefore, the shape of the line, the path of the line is going to be a little more oval because I went further out when I went down and pulled it further in when I went up. It's just the way it went because I went too heavy. Ideally, what you want to do is you want to get that path as straight as possible. So that's one way of knowing whether or not you properly lifted that weight. So log your weights, take videos, talk to your coach if you have one, talk to a friend if they know what they're doing, stuff like that. Even get spots as well, especially with back. Back is very, very important for spots, especially in machine. Not that they can help you lift the weight up, but if they can poke your back where you're targeting or give you pointers on what you're doing wrong, the most advanced lifters still can use pointers. Nick Walker is training with, I think, Sarkev right now. No, not Sarkev, Matt Jansen, right? Matt Jansen. I think he's in Vegas with Matt right now, lifting and getting ready for the Arnold. And 100%, he has people telling him what to do in the gym, even though he's one of the biggest bodybuilders out there. I mean, we can all use advice from people. And, I've said this to you, Christoph, a million times. My lessons learned is your knowledge gained. And one thing I can for sure say is that if there's a big dude in the gym or a dude that clearly knows what he's doing, just ask and be like, "Hey, can you take it? Can you watch my set or can you record for me? I just want to see how it looks." And 9 times out of 10, almost guaranteed, they're going to be like, "Absolutely, man, not a problem." So we're all in the same boat here, and we all want the same general goals here. So if you're doing a movement that you're not 100% confident in, just ask someone, "Hey, can you just watch my form and see what it looks like?" Even if there's a personal trainer at your gym that's not doing anything, I mean, obviously you don't want to interrupt them if they're working with a client, but like if they're sitting at a computer or something, be like, "Hey, I hate to bother you. Can you just watch this set for me? I'm not sure if I'm hitting it properly. It's new for me. I just want to see what you think of it, and they'll give you pointers. So, asking for that help and really making sure that you're getting everything out of the sets you can will go a long way in the long term, and it'll help a lot, so something to keep in mind.
I had someone stop me in my last leg day, in between sets and just ask me how the fuck a vertical leg press works.
It's so
And, like,
weird.
but
Yeah.
that's the thing, like legs are the one thing that I take pride in because I have, decent size and great definition in my legs, and, like, I take pride in that, so then when someone comes up and goes, "Hey, what the fuck you doing?" Like, that's just it's a very nice
Mhm.
moment to have.
Yeah.
And when we talk about our logs, Paul and I's logs probably look like a Madden playbook at this point with all the different
Yeah.
words and shit we're using.
Yeah.
Like even when Paul sends them to me, I'm like, "Hey, what's the audible? What are you talking about here?"
Yeah.
But that's logging is going to be very specific between you and your coach if you have one. So
Yeah.
um, don't take someone else's log as gospel.
Yeah.
I do want to end us with the one back movement we haven't talked about yet, and it's in a video I sent you, but it's the hexagon hexagon or sorry hex bar plate loaded deadlift skateboard kickflip that I
Oh,
sent
geez,
you.
I remember that now.
And that is the ultimate back movement. For those who don't know, it's a meme. It's this guy who does he has a gym in his garage. He does a whole bunch of weird deadlifts, and he did one where he did a hex bar deadlift with a chain around his neck, and at the top of the rep, he did a kickflip on a skateboard and landed it. So there's really goofy things, but that's the ultimate back exercise. If you do that, you will have back boobs within a week.
That's so dumb, but it's such a flex if you do that. That's such a flex.
Such an unnecessary flex too.
Yeah,
Like
it's so.
you could show that off to like 100 people and maybe 5 of them will care.
Yeah. There's no. You don't really gain anything from it, but it's just definitely like this is something I can do.
It adds to your riz. That's
Yeah,
that's what it does.
yeah. It adds a whole nother degree to your riz for sure.
They call me the back rizzler.
I'm the Rizzler.
But yeah, with that, I hope you guys took something out of today's back talk. And as always, if there's something that you want us to elaborate more on, if you have questions about what we discussed, and overall just want to give feedback, we have our email that you can send emails to, which is hgh at hgh at hghpodcast.com, something like
It's
that.
HGH at hghcast.com is our
Yep.
email. So shoot us emails for questions and all of that. Once we build up enough questions, maybe we'll do a whole episode dedicated to it. I think that'd be very fun. If you guys wanted to hear us talk about a specific topic, answer a specific question for you, we can address it on the podcast. So that'd be very entertaining, I think.
And we have a caller. Jamie, can you plug them in?
Yeah. Jamie, can you pull that up real quick?
Yeah. But yeah, with that, guys, keep on lifting and keep doing you. And we will see you next week with our brand new episode.
Yeah, see you guys.
All right. Bye, everybody.